What is failing us are personalities, the individuals who've been appointed to those offices. We are appointing whimsical individuals to these offices who cannot stand up and stare down the executive when pressure comes to bear. Justice Maraga, when it came, for example, to recommending for Parliament to be dissolved for not meeting the 2/3 agenda principle, he stood on his own. He said, yes, this is what I'm giving the recommendation to the President. Okay. Despite the threats from Parliament and even the executive, he said, no, the law is very clear. You are supposed to enact the laws on 2/3 agenda principle. You've not done it. I am recommending to the President dissolve Parliament.
The government of course, has maintained its stance on fighting corruption in the country. Do you think that it's actually an end for corrupt officials in Kenya?
It's an end for corrupt officials in Kenya. They're having a field day.
Field day?
The corrupt officials are having a field day in Kenya. Tell me which conviction we've had in the last 1 year. So he needs to explain to Kenyans what happened and where is the 63 billion. Or he also needs to come and tell us, forget about it. Then we can know what to do as people of Kenya. That we will give 63 billion shillings a donation to the air. Our state agencies are not able to tell us who got that money and how they were paid and why we cannot get it.
Well, a very good day to you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Candid Talk here on Herman Manyora's YouTube channel. I'm so glad to have you on board. My good name is Evan Sokinyi, and of course I told you that our team is on the ground and will bring you up to date with comprehensive analysis of everything taking place in this country and across our borders. Well, today, as usual, I'm joined by Wakili Willis Otieno yet for another conversation with him on what is taking place in this country. Wakili, how are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing quite great.
That's good.
And I'm, of course, glad, even though the weather in the city, or rather the country, I don't know whether there are parts of the country is a little bit different, but then it's chilly and cold at the same time.
Yes.
And we're having this conversation this morning here. Now, a conversation that has actually, or rather an occurrence that has actually struck the minds of Kenyans is now kind of statement that we received from the High Court, where the former Treasury CS Henry Rotich was actually acquitted of all the charges therein, along with his co-accused members. There are 8 of them. And here this has also sparked a lot of conversations among Kenyans. People are wondering what's actually happening here. This was a scandal that was involving around 63 billion shillings. Of course, that is not some little money, if anything is to go by. But then there are more questions than answer to this. Now, let's begin from here. Who bears the heaviest burden in such kind of circumstances whereby money is lost that is supposed to be aiding in construction of public projects? These projects have not been completed, and people just go out there for free, and we cannot actually account for this entire money.
Of course, the ultimate responsibility lies with the Director of Public Prosecutions. Because even in this particular instance, Henry Rotich was not acquitted, that he went through a formal trial process, witnesses were called, and there was no case to answer. He was acquitted because the state, through the DPP, failed to avail witnesses. At that point, now the hands of the magistrate are tied, because you only you convict based on evidence that's available, that has been presented. In this case, there was no evidence. The prosecution failed to call witnesses. But ultimately, the people who bear this loss are the people of Kenya. Because as it is not in doubt that 63 billion Kenya shillings was paid out. That is not in doubt. It is not in doubt that if you go to the ground at Arror-Kimwarer, there is no dam.
Definitely.
So somewhere along the way, money was released. The project was not implemented. And the people of Kenya ended up losing money. And those who bore the greatest responsibility for that have been acquitted. So probably it's coming out that in this particular state, it pays to be a criminal. You just make sure that the DPP doesn't call the witnesses. And you are cleansed through the criminal trial process, where you cannot now be charged again afresh based on those same facts. Because an acquittal, unfortunately, what it ends up doing is that when you're acquitted of a criminal trial, you cannot be charged afresh, as opposed to a discharge. Because if you're discharged, fresh charges can be brought against you. So probably they're just laundering the suspects through the court process to give them now absolute immunity, that even if a new administration was to take up the matter, it will be said that they've been tried and acquitted, and you cannot bring any new charges against them. That's the unfortunate state we find ourselves in today in relation to Arror-Kimwarer. Yes.
Now, this actually raises a number of questions with the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. Remember, this is an independent office that was actually put there in the Constitution to address this kind of matters. Now, apparently, we are wondering, why would the entire body of, definitely an entire prosecution body, which is an independent body in the Constitution, decide to pursue a case that they're not willing to follow up with, actually up to its logical conclusion?
Well, probably there was a desire to pursue the case initially when it was initiated. It is now more once the case was filed in court that you start witnessing the shenanigans of witnesses not being called. The state is not leading evidence to prove the case against the accused persons, thence leading to this acquittal by the court. So our DPPs, in as much as it's an independent office, maybe we should be questioning what does that independent entail? Because then it means that in certain instances, political players may manipulate that independence to achieve a particular outcome. I'm not saying that I have evidence that there was any such that occurred in this particular instance, but the DPP owes the people of Kenya an explanation and a public display of the nature of evidence that they had collected against the suspects to show why they made an opinion that this was a case that the suspects bore the greatest criminal responsibility and ought to be charged and convicted. And then what happened in the trial process? Why were they acquitted? Where was all this evidence that led to them forming an opinion that they have criminal cases, charges to answer? You know, normally, for example, in the United States, where the FBI, if the FBI comes to you that they are arresting you, by the time they move in to arrest you, it's a sure bet that you're going to be convicted, especially
so
when
they
these
have concrete evidence.
Yes, by the time
to pursue that case.
Yes, because by the time they make a decision to charge, to arrest and to charge, the investigators have looked at the evidence, they formed an opinion. The internal lawyer, the State Department has looked, the Justice Department has looked at the evidence that's available and have formed an opinion that actually this is a conviction. This leads straight to a conviction. So that by the time they are going out to arrest, it is a sure bet, because you've had several tiers of people looking at the evidence, and some of these are senior lawyers, people who understand the criminal justice system, who believe that based on the evidence that they collected, it's a conviction of the suspect. But in Kenya, in fact, normally what they do in the US is that by the time they come for you, what you'll be looking at is a plea bargain, because the evidence is so overwhelming and the threshold has been met. You may just be going, the question is how long are you going in, not if you are going in. But in Kenya, the DPP moves in with gusto to arraign suspects, telling us that there's enough evidence, so much evidence that will lead to a conviction. But then somewhere along the way, we are seeing cases falling like dominoes. You can't even explain why was there so much fanfare at the points of arrest, and yet they live with a whimper when it comes to the final stage of the criminal justice system. Yes.
It is on record that the DPP while pursuing this case, they received, it is alleged that they received actually firm instructions to stop pursuing this kind of case. And then we're also wondering now, where are these firm instructions from? Where did that order actually come from in any way? So in this kind of case where a lot of money that is supposed to be going into financing public projects is lost, and then we don't see anything taking place, and then there is also somebody from somewhere who can actually give firm instructions to the DPP, and then this ends up actually not giving the Kenyans whatever it is that they want. Like, there is no value seen here. The projects are failed already. But then there is this kind of information that we're getting that somebody somewhere said no. So it also gets me back to the kind of who's and the kind of problems that we've witnessed with the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. This is one of the cases that I believe back then Nudin Haji was still in charge. Right now he's not there. There is always that kind of perception, or rather what has been said here, that this office has been misused over time. And could it then be true that these are offices that are just there for the sake of it and that cannot actually help in the administration of justice in the country?
Of course, that is what is coming out. Because if they are not able, by the time, because DPP's office is an office manned by lawyers. The magistrates are lawyers, trained lawyers. The judges are trained lawyers. So that there is no separate training that you can say DPP go through that magistrates don't go through. We all go through the same law schools.
Okay.
And some people just specialize now depending on the career path they've chosen. So by the time a DPP forms an opinion to charge, he should be convinced that what I have before me should be something that will lead to a conviction.
Okay.
Otherwise, you ask for more investigations, further investigations, before you make the decision to charge. But in this particular instance, maybe the calls were coming from somewhere. Maybe the investigation was not complete. Maybe the calls are coming in now, and they're told now, go slow, and don't call witnesses, don't call evidence. That will lead to a conviction. What you saw before that led you to make a decision that you are going to prefer the criminal charges against the suspect. You know, it's important that Kenyans contextualize. When we talk of 63 billion Kenyan shillings is lost. The whole of Thika Road, as done by Kibaki, it costed the people of Kenya 30 billion, 32 billion Kenyan shillings to be precise. Now 63 billion is double Thika Road.
Okay.
So you can tell me that, just put the picture in your mind, that someone took money that will have built Thika Road twice. That's the loss that we had. So if you are saying Arror-Kimwarer, you don't contextualize it. When you talk about 63 billion, do you know how many kids you can pay for bursaries if you're paying bursaries? How many health centers in this country you can kit for a whole year with medicine that will be able to sustain primary health care across all the dispensaries and clinics in this country at no cost? So that is what we are talking about. So it is not just some forest somewhere that you are saying we've lost 63 billion. 63 billion will have had a great impact in the lives of Kenyans, even in terms of opening up the country, in terms of providing opportunities for our young people to access education, providing healthcare services to the bulk of our population who are not able to afford healthcare services. That is what is at stake here. But then, when the DPP casually handles a case that led to such a loss of such a colossal sum of money, then it behooves that office to come out and explain to the public, then where is this 63 billion Kenya shillings? If it is not there, where is that dam that this money went into? Show us the dam and its state of development and completion. We are missing that. But all we know is that there's no money and there's no dam. The people of Kenya have lost. And some of those monies that were paid to the Arror-Kimwarer constitute the debts that we are now being forced to pay for.
Okay.
So the debts we are paying for, what we call odious debts, that the Kenya people took, Kenya government took, is now straining the economy of this country, and we are suffering by the day when it comes to the cost of living, rising inflation, right? So it is very important that we need to start putting, for example, the DPP to task. He owes us an explanation. And if there be no explanation, then it's in the best interest of the country that he should resign from that office.
This is the current...
yes, because there is what we call succession of office. The decision, the acquittal has occurred when he's the one in office.
When he's the one in office, so he should be actually held.
He needs to explain. He can't say that was Nurdin who started it. The office is perpetual. There's what we call perpetual succession in an office. That office is perpetual. So he needs to explain to Kenyans what happened and where is the 63 billion. Or he also needs to come and tell us, forget about it. Then we can know what to do as people of Kenya. That we will give 63 billion shillings a donation to the heir. Our state agencies are not able to tell us who got that money and how they were paid and why we cannot get it. Yes.
Do you think it's possible that the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions can actually work effectively without any kind of political interference?
Of course it can. It just needs a strong DPP. Just needs somebody who is, understands his functions. And you just show some mettle. Of course, politicians always want to interfere with any independent office holder. But it takes a strong personality to steer the office away from the executive. I remember my friend Maina Kiai when he was chairman of the Kenya National Commission of Human Rights. And you know that the bulk of human rights abuses are done by state agencies. And the state tried putting pressure on Maina Kiai, and Maina said that it refused to bend. And at the time they wanted to charge him for buying vehicles for the Kenya National Commission of Human Rights without allegedly following the procurement process. He had bought vehicles which were 2,000 cc when he was supposed to buy vehicles worth 3,500 cc. So Maina simply went back and said, okay, fine. I'll come, we'll record my statement, I will do it in public. I will admit that the commission has bought vehicles 2,000 cc while we were supposed to buy 3,500 cc. We've saved money for the people of Kenya. I am guilty as charged. I'm not going to court. I am reporting to prison. Tell me which prison I should report to. Of course, it was so clear. It was part of harassment. You are forcing someone to spend more money to buy a vehicle 3,500 cc. The commission has bought vehicles worth 2,000 cc. I mean, that's 2,000 cc rating. And in the end result, the people of Kenya have saved money. Then you think that's a basis to charge someone. He said, I am ready to go to, in fact, don't even take me to court. Let me go to report to which prison you want me to report to. And I'll serve my term and I'll come out of it. If that be an offense. So it takes personalities, it takes individuals to grow some steel. People should need to have a back of steel to stand up to this pressure. Because when these offices were being created as independent offices, the people of Kenya knew that the political class will want to exert some level of interference in how they perform their functions. These were offices that previously were domiciled in the executive, and they were manipulated to pursue political interests. So we decided consciously to remove them from the domicile in the executive and make them independent.
And have we succeeded in doing that?
No, we succeeded in creating them as independent offices in the constitution. What is failing us are personalities, the individuals who've been appointed to those offices. We are appointing whimsical individuals to these offices who cannot stand up and stare down the executive when pressure comes to bear. Justice Maraga, when it came, for example, to recommending for Parliament to be dissolved for not meeting the two-thirds agenda principle, he stood on his own. He said, yes, this is what I'm giving the recommendation to the President. Despite the threats from Parliament and even the executive, he said, no, the law is very clear. You are supposed to enact the laws on two-thirds agenda principle. You've not done it. I am recommending to the President, dissolve Parliament. We need those kind of people. That is what this country lacks. The people who are holding offices, majority of them, are cowards. They cannot stand up to executive pressure. But when you apply for these offices, you should know that that office was created to be an office to act as a bulwark against executive interference and executive manipulation. So all that needs to grow some steel balls and stand up against manipulation and interference. And you'll expect the executive to try to interfere.
But of course,
that is their nature.
The executive is the appointing authority.
No. The executive just does what we call the ceremonial appointment.
Is it really ceremonial?
It is ceremonial because the Constitution has given an elaborate process for these office holders to be appointed. Through interviews, public participation, and you get to the best. So the appointment by the executive is, at the presidential level, is purely ceremonial. He's doing the ultimate act of conferring the appointment to the person. But through the interview process, the public participation process, we should have sieved the best. That all that is doing is just to ratify.
Looking at the recent appointments in the public service and all that, would you say that these appointments are just ceremonial per se?
Of course, some of them there's a lot of executive interferences, but it depends again. We've not had many. In fact, if my take, I think it's just the DPP is the only constitutional office holder who has been appointed in the Ruto regime so far. The rest, the IBC appointments have still stalled. The others which they have appointed, those are political appointments. Those ones are done by the executive based on the powers conferred upon them. But when it comes to appointment of a constitutional office holder, those are independent offices. And the process is very elaborate. The interview process should give us the best. And part of the measuring standard should be how courageous is this person you are nominating or recommending for appointment. It should be someone who can stare a gun in the eye and say, I will do as per the Constitution.
Okay. Now, of course, the former Director of Public Prosecutions, Newdin, admitted to having been forced to follow up a lot of cases back then. Look at the cases that were revolving around the now Deputy President of the country, Rigathi Gachagua. A number of high-profile cases actually were dropped, especially after the last elections. Now, I actually don't understand something here, because in as much as he was admitting that he actually was pressured by some powers that maybe, I'm wondering, wouldn't it be in order for him at that particular time actually to resign now that he decided to succumb to those pressures during that particular moment?
Of course, when you are appointed to a constitutional office, you're supposed to discharge the functions of your office without fear or favor.
Okay.
So if he says that he was manipulated, then it means he was discharging the functions of his office with fear. So he betrayed the oath of office, of that office. So yes, he ought to have resigned if he felt that there was too much pressure coming his way and he was manipulated to arrive at that decision. That's why I say, because assuming that it is true he was manipulated to charge these people, can you imagine the humiliation and the torment that these people who are being charged went through? Just because you are not performing your functions as required by law. Because when you drag a suspect through a court process without any legal basis, there is no substantive evidence that will sustain a charge. But this person is forced to be humiliated, to be dragged through a court process, attend mentions, go for hearings. Then ultimately, you withdraw the charges. You know the mental damage you're causing to this person, the reputational damage you're causing to this person. So a Director of Public Prosecutions ought not to be had to be saying that I prefer the charges based on external influence or pressure. That is an admission that if that be the case, then he deserves to resign. And he needs to tell the people of Kenya, I cannot withstand the pressure. There is too much manipulation. Then let me leave it to Kenyans to choose another person who can withstand this kind of political pressure and manipulation.
The government has of course, has maintained its stance on fighting corruption in the country. Do you think that it's actually an end for corrupt officials in Kenya?
It's an end for corrupt officials in Kenya. They're having a field day.
Field day?
The corrupt officials are having a field day in Kenya. Tell me which conviction we've had in the last 1 year.
Of course, I'm yet to get
which meaningful conviction have you had? Corruption pays. That seems to be the language, that the message we are getting. Because look at the landscape. Those who are charged with corruption from the last regime, most of them have been discharged. The ones who, some who are still in court have been in court now for 3 years. They are roaming the streets. The trials have not concluded. Some who've been charged like Rotich have been acquitted. So, what is the pain, the threat of pain, that anybody in public office says that doesn't pay? Corruption pays. That seems to be the message in Kenya today. Because you don't have any high-profile conviction. All that ESCC parades to us are miniature policemen who are collecting 50 shillings on the streets along our roads from matatu drivers. They arrest them with a lot of fanfare and cameras and guns. Then they pass an edict that traffic police officers should not be carrying guns. But that is not the corruption threat of the nation. The corruption threat of the nation is not the 50 shillings that a policeman is collecting along the streets. Arresting all those policemen will not send a message to stop corruption. But if you arrest the bigwigs, the masterminds of corruption at a grand scale level, and you arrest all of them and take them to court and you prosecute them successfully, that will send shivers down the spine of the entire executive establishment. And you'll see it changing. But there's nothing like that happening. You are seeing members of parliament. We know how much they earn. When a member of parliament walks with 10 million Kenya shillings cash money, When a CS goes to a public function and donates casually 1 million Kenyan shillings, and we know how much they earn, and they're doing this in cash, right? What does that tell you? Of course, obviously, this money, with all due respect, is not from a legitimate source.
Okay.
Because we know how much these people are earning. So where is this windfall that now somebody can be walking around with the 10 million Kenya shillings cash and donating? It simply means that corruption is now thriving in this regime. And we are going back to the cash society.
Okay.
Because corruption thrives in cash. If this money was legitimate, why is it in the banking system? It should be in the banking system.
Okay.
Let them make RTGS and bank transfers or paychecks. Because the banks will ask for supporting documents.
Okay.
The source of money and what's intended to.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, 63 billion shillings down the drain. That is what actually the kind of judgment that we received from the High Court means for this country. Now, the question is, who actually bears the biggest burden here? Dr. Henry Rotich, of course, the former CA's Treasury, says the devil has been ashamed. Well, I wonder what's your take in what is taking place with regards to that particular case and judgment therein. Please weigh in on this conversation and tell us whether you think that things will actually change with regards to management of public resources in this country. And we do hope that these conversations will actually shape the kind of governance that we will witness in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to stop this conversation at this particular moment, but please do not fail to subscribe to our channel here if you're watching us for the first time, and stay tuned to some of our programs that will be coming up to you. Definitely, Richard Mwinje is here, as well as Jadel Kabiro. Till we have this conversation again, have yourself a lovely day. My name is Evans Okini.